Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Manufacturers round number 7, driving at Willow Springs in the Group 4 cars. So this round, wasn't expecting too much. I decided to go for the last slot because I wanted to try and come across a lot of four-wheel drive cars. That was the tactic. Unfortunately there was still some NSXs and a Cayman in this race. You can see on starting from P2 there, Skype up and a good lap in that RCF. Again, that car was pretty similar to my car, I think, for qualifying pace. In the race it might have been a little bit better because of its fuel, but then behind me obviously Oscar and Manson again in the Citroen. I knew that car would be strong, although not the strongest in outright pace. Its fuel ability is just so hard to live with. And then we're going to go through the grids. The Hyundai was actually a fairly good car, but then we get to the four-wheel drive cars, which is what I wanted. A lot of four-wheel drive cars, and I expected it. That's why I went for the last slot, and I was greeted with quite a lot of four-wheel drive cars. You can see there was plenty of like the RCFs and that's still in the race. Corvette, pretty much similar type of cars to the ability of the SLS. Going through the grid there, another Corvette there. So there was plenty of equal cars, I'd say to myself, but then there was plenty of cars that I knew I would have an advantage over a tyre wear, like front wheel drive, Scirocco, J Adams there in the Evolution. I knew these cars would all be struggling, and that's why they all went for this race, and that's why I went for this race, because I just predicted that a lot of four-wheel drive cars would be picking this race, because they know in general that's where they won't come across a lot of the faster like Caymans and the Renaults and stuff that would have picked higher split races to get more points. But this worked out quite well for me because there was still quite a lot of points available at this, because a lot of the four-wheel drive cars that were in this race were quite high ranked. So I think it was 2,600 points available for P1, going through the grid. P19, the other Mercedes in the race there, showing that I actually did a fairly okay job. I was reasonably happy with my qualifying on a 1 minute 17.7. The best I'd got in practice was a 0.5, but before I came into this lobby I was expecting if I get a 0.7 I'm happy, and I managed to get that on the first lap I did in qualifying. So starting from P4, the aim really is just to try and hold on to a top 5 position, because I knew the Citroen was behind me, and one thing that was always going to be a case is that Citroen's going to outdo me in the pits, because it's obviously going to keep its tyres better with it being mid-engined rear-wheel drive. Obviously the Mercedes SLS front-engined rear-wheel drive, so a lot of the weight's on the front, and through these fast corners it's going to really take a lot of tyre wear out of that front left-hand tyre. So my aim is just to try and get a top 5 position and see what points come about, but I did know that a P5 wouldn't really benefit me with in terms of points, because the lowest points I currently have is about 2,069, and I think that's the exact points that were available for P5. So I really had to get a P3 or something to really gain any sort of points in the championship, but I kind of knew that was really going to be a hard task. But starting from P4, just trying to hang on to the Cayman. You can see having to do a lot of fuel saving, because I knew the abilities. I'd done practice races with Sky Piltman, Stefanzi and Oscar Manson behind me. I seen the ability of the Megans with the fuel, the Caymans. So my aim really for this first stint is to really do a lot of fuel saving, and it actually kind of helped me in a way, because the fuel saving, using that mixture 2 through the corners, helped the front left tyre wear. It just stopped it getting too bad. As you can see, straight away on lap 1 managed to get myself past P4 with a fairly easy move, because he made that mistake on the corner before the straight, giving me the chance to get the run and then get a nice clean exit from the last corner and try and get into P2 slipstream. You can see about 8 tenths back, but managing to pick that slipstream up, which was really important. So I've got to keep the fuel saving going and try and stay within the slipstream of P2. Oscar Sky Piltman there in P2. You can see the NSX in the lead. There wasn't really much chance of doing anything about the NSX. This is a perfect track for the NSX. The NSX has got great cornering ability, it's got reasonable straight line speed, and its fuel saving ability is one of the best cars in the game on Group 4 cars. So for this race it's just about trying to hold on to Oscar Sky Piltman really. I think his car was pretty equal to mine, but I'd say it was probably a little bit better in terms of its fuel saving ability than the car I've got. Obviously we know about the RCF and its ability to save a lot of fuel, so you can see myself using, I'd worked out my strategy. I knew that the plan was to use fuel mixture 2 as much as possible through the corners, short shift to fuel mixture 1 down the straights, and then once it at high speeds I was constantly putting into fuel mixture 2, because it saves a bit of fuel and you don't lose too much speed, especially when you're in a slipstream. So this was the strategy that I knew I was going to have to go with before going in the race, and I tried to stick to it as much as possible. You're going to see there, going into 6th gear, you see once I'm about 142 miles per hour in the slipstream, putting into fuel mixture 2 again. This also helped out with the tyre wear going through this right hand corner, because you're not putting as much power into pushing that front left hand tyre through the corner, which is going to help save that tyre fractionally. It's not a massive amount, but this track really is a tyre killer, and that's why you see all the four-wheel drive cars in this last slot race, because they really didn't have a chance at this track. It was such a hard track for them, and there was not much they could do. 18 laps of this track, 9 laps absolutely killed the four-wheel drive cars, tyres, and the front-wheel drive cars. There was pretty much no chance of them being able to compete with anything with rear-wheel drive, and that's why this slot was quite a good slot for myself, and that's why I'm up into P3. Although the SLS was not the strongest car here, it was definitely one of the better cars in this race. The Cayman and the NSX, probably the better cars, but the RCF in front of me is a car that I can race against. The only thing is once we get into the pit stop phase, it's probably going to be able to save a lot more fuel than me, as you can see. I'm doing an okay job though. I knew the strategy I had to run. I knew how much I could save if I did extreme fuel saving, but I really wanted to hang on to that slipstream of Oscar Sky Piltman. So revving these gears out a little bit more than I would have liked, but you can see still doing a fair amount of short shifting and just trying to hold the revs around that midpoint when changing gear and putting into that mixture 2 again. I really stuck to my plan and tried to stick to a set routine of doing my laps the way that I'd been practicing. I'd done quite a lot of practice for this. This is a track that will literally take you out if you make 1 lapse of concentration, because obviously there's no real runoff, it's just sand on the side, so one mistake and you lose a lot of time at this track. But you can see P4 behind me in that Cayman putting me under some pressure. He's obviously got the faster car, but while I'm holding on to Sky Piltman, I might as well just try and hold on to him and hold that Cayman up, really, because if I can hold him up, and if he hasn't saved as much fuel as me, although the Cayman again is a good car at the fuel saving, so I kind of expected he'd out fuel save me, so it's just a case of just holding him up and seeing if he can hold up Oscar Manson, who's behind in the Citroen, and just seeing how this race progresses. At the moment, everything is going really well. I'm managing to hold on to P2. P1 is starting to pull away a bit there now. You can see he's obviously just driving his own race, and not really much you can do against the NSX here. It's quite a strong car, and tyre wear starting to kick in for myself and Oscar Sky Piltman now. This is where our car's lap 5, you can see the front left starting to take some wear. That's the tyre that was really killing the SLS and the RCF. It's the front left tyre because of these fast right hand corners. You can see all the weight, all the power's going into that front left hand tyre. Obviously the rear wheels are pushing that front left hand tyre, it's trying to grip, and that's why I was using that mixture 2, just to try and soften that a little bit and just to take a little bit less life out of these tyres. Getting a nice run up to Oscar Sky Piltman, but there's no point making a irrational dive there. Better for myself just to hang on in this slipstream and just try and use him to help me save fuel. So I'm staying in fuel mixture 2 there while I'm in this slipstream as close as I am. And through this corner, another corner, that these are the corners that really take the life out of the tyre. They're long and you're on the power pretty much all the way through. So short shifting as well, coming out of that corner into mixture 5, going into the braking zone just before the 50 board. That is the board I use for my reference, that 50 board on the right hand side, braking just short of that, and just trying to make sure that I'm keeping it smooth, not taking too much life out of the tyre. So important. The tyre wear on this track with the 18 laps is really, I can imagine how bad a top 24 race would have 100% been a 2-stopper. I don't think if this race was 4 laps more, I think it would have been a 2-stopper. I think it would have been a real struggle to keep these tyres going for an extra 2 laps on each stint. They were really starting to struggle. Maybe it would have been a 1-stop, I don't know. It's hard to work out with the tyre wear and how much time you were losing the lap. It worked out about 8 tenths, I think 9 tenths of a second a lap by the end of the stint. So it's interesting to see what strategies would have worked, as I made a mistake on that final corner and gave the Cayman a chance to get past me and lost the slipstream of P2. So you can see the tyre wear starting to kick in now and starting to affect the grip I'm getting through these corners. It was a mistake on my behalf though. I could have done that better. I just went into the really struggle on that last corner. It's a corner that you really have to hook up and get the braking perfect for to get the right line through there, as P3 nearly runs off the track into the gravel on the left hand side and just about gets away with that, and again runs wide, and I actually followed him there. Something that happens so much in racing, when you see someone make a mistake in front of you, you tend to follow their car into a mistake. So I nearly did the same thing, but luckily got away with that, as I've now got Oscar Manson right behind me, and TRL Org doing a very good job in that Nissan GTR. I have to say that for that GTR to stay with this pace all the way up to lap 6. Obviously I think he might be using a little bit more fuel than what we are, because we're doing a lot of fuel saving and trying to preserve them tyres for the last few laps. The GTR though really did struggle with tyres at this track, so still doing an amazing job there in P6 in that GTR. I'm guessing he didn't expect to be that high up in any of these top split races, because the GTR really did struggle around him more than pretty much any of the, I think it was pretty much one of the worst four-wheel drive cars as well for tyre. It was terrible at this track. So we're now starting lap 7 of the first stint of the 9 laps on the first stint. So coming through, closing in on the pit stop phase, and at the moment I was reasonably happy with my performance. You know, I made that one mistake which lost me the slipstream of Oscar Sky Pit, which I really kind of did need, because the ability of the RCF is its ability to stay reasonably strong down the straights while still doing fuel saving. The Mercedes is not the worst car at it, but it's just not as strong as them cars at doing fuel saving. So I've now just got to stick to my plan. I didn't want to just burn up fuel to get back in the slipstream, because my tyres were already starting to struggle. So I just kept to my tactic of saving the fuel and just trying to preserve a reasonable finish in this race. Obviously I want to keep my driver rating as high as possible. It's still on 75k. I want to keep it at that maximum rating, and a top 6 or 7 finish in this race should enable me to keep that 75k. Although it's no real relevance now, because all the top 24 races are done by points rather than the way round 6 was by driver rating. And hopefully round 8 is going to be a reasonably good round for me. I do love Monza. It's one of my favourite tracks on pretty much any game. I tend to be fairly strong there. I don't think the Mercedes is the strongest car for that track, but at the moment I was top of the top 10 stars. Whether that will still be a case, I pretty much doubt it, because once the Dodge Vipers, the Nissan GTRs and the Mustangs start putting some good laps in, they're going to probably dominate that leaderboard, because they are a bit stronger than the Mercedes AMG. But hopefully I can outdrive the Mercedes a bit at that track, because that is, you know, one of my better tracks. Round 6 was one of my weaker tracks. Round 8 at Monza is one of my favourite tracks. So hopefully I can do some sort of good performance there and get some reasonably solid points. I'm hoping so anyway. But getting back onto this race, as I've run a little bit wide into that corner again, the tyres starting to really lose the grip. You can see that front left hand tyre. That's a tyre that was really poor with the Mercedes, because like I say, with the weight on this car all on the front, it's taking the abuse on that front left hand tyre. So really hard to keep this car keeping speed, but you know, it's not doing a terrible job. We're coming up to the end of lap 8, just one more lap before we go into the pits, and I'm just a second behind P3, who is now starting to put a lot of pressure on Oscar Sky Pit. You know, he's obviously suffering with them tyres as well. The Cayman in a much better situation, just like the Citroen behind me, rear wheel drive and the mid-engine, so they've got the perfect balance for this track. As you're going to see now, Oscar Manson going in the pits for the undercut, and he goes in the pits on 40% fuel. I'm on 38%, so I've actually done a really good job with my fuel at this stage. He's got 2% more fuel, and maybe I should have pitted with him there and tried to do the undercut as well. That might have been a thing, but I kind of wanted to stick to the 9 laps, because the advantage the Citroen's got is on the 10th lap, their tyres are going to be in better condition. If I do 10 laps, the front left is pretty much got nothing left in it, and I would have been understeering through every corner. So I just kept to my plan, doing the fuel saving. I wasn't even worried about him doing the undercut. I knew that he was going to probably come out ahead of me. He's got 2% more fuel. He's then going to put a faster outlap in. So for me, it's best just to stick to my plan and just try and maintain a reasonable position in this race. You can see Oscar Sky Piltman now starting to suffer like myself. I'm actually starting to gain in a bit on Oscar Piltman, and P3 is putting him under intense pressure just up ahead on the road there. You can see he's really starting to hassle the rear of that car, and we're going to be interested to see what the pits are like. This is going to prove a point really with the fuel. I'm not too sure what the Cayman would have gone in with the fuel. I have no idea, but I expected that P2 and P1 would go in with really good fuel. So P1 in the NSX 34%. That's 3% more than what I'm going to go in. Let's have a little look at what the fuel is as I go in. I'm on 31%, Oscar Sky Piltman 34%, and the Cayman 36%. So I came in the pits with the worst out of them, but a lot better than the cars behind me. So I had done a really good job with the fuel, but it just shows you that you cannot live with the NSX for race pace round here and fuel. I put a little bit over the diamond this time, even though it did cause me issues in the last race, but I knew this race it wouldn't be as bad, because the four-wheel drive cars were that far behind. There wasn't really an issue. It was TRL Org behind there. I think he had pitted possibly on the previous lap. I'm not too sure when he pitted, but he's come out and he's behind myself by about 4.3 seconds. So he hadn't done as much fuel saving either, but he did struggle on the last few laps, I think. So the plan's going okay so far. I did reasonably good fuel saving. I did a lot better than some of the other cars, but there was just no way of living with the RCF and the Cayman and the NSX. The ability of that NSX to be driving as fast as he was and to save the amount of fuel that he did going into the pits really does show you how strong these cars are. And you can see obviously the Citroen as well put himself into P2, which again shows you how strong that car is, and shows you the ability of that undercut. I'm guessing he went quite low on the fuel again, because the advantage of the Citroen is when they short shift it doesn't really lose any speed at all down the straight, so they can just keep with the set strategy of doing that for the next stint, whereas I tried to put a bit more fuel in, which probably lost me a few seconds in the pits. I'm guessing Oscar Manson underfueled a fair bit there, or just went for pretty much the same strategy on both stints. As you can see, P5 Jamie going into the pits, doing the 10 laps on his first stint, obviously trying to eke out that first stint so he can at least drive a little bit more aggressive on the second stint. But again, not much these four-wheel drive cars can do with this track. It was a horrible track for them, and I did feel for them at this track. There was no real chance of them getting a really strong result. It was all about the mid-engined rear-wheel drive cars here. Luckily, I had probably the second best configuration of front-engined rear-wheel drive. Much better than the four-wheel drive cars, but still not as good as the mid-engine cars. As going through there with the purple sector, hitting a reasonable lap time so far. The laps have been really consistent. You can see the first stint managing to hold 18s pretty much all the way through the first stint while doing excessive fuel saving, and obviously managing to just one lap, I think there, lap 8 crept into the 19.2s when I was obviously the tyres are starting to really kick in. But I felt like that was good. In the practice runs, that's pretty much the times that I was running in practice sessions before the lobbies. Considering I'm doing the fuel saving, I kept the fuel saving pretty similar to how I did it in the pre-lobby, obviously practice sessions in online public lobbies, and I couldn't really complain about my paces. The paces are pretty much what I expected. I just can't really do anything more than this with this SLS. You can see Oscar Sky Piltman keeping that gap around 3 seconds ahead of me as I go over the line with a personal best of the race, as expected, with the new tyres on, an 18.1. I could have pushed for more, but you can see I'm keeping that fuel saving going, even though I put a bit more fuel in. What the plan was put a bit more fuel in, that enables me to rev it out a bit on the straights, but I didn't want to rev it out on the corners. I wanted to keep the fuel saving through the corners because of the tyres. So it is all a strategy just to try and get this car now into the top 5. I'm in P5. P4's a little bit too far ahead as I go through that sector of a purple sector, which would quite surprise me because I expected some of the other cars to be starting to put some faster times in now. As you can see, P1 has already put a 1 minute 17.5 and in that NSX, where he is long gone. He's 11 seconds up the road. He's now able to drive more aggressively, probably because he's put more fuel in, and there's no way of catching P1 or P2 really. You can see P2 is completely gone. You can't even see. I think P2 is actually just ahead of the Porsche there, so he might start coming back a bit. I expect the Porsche to make a move on Oscar Manson, but Oscar Sky Piltman 3.2 seconds ahead. He's starting to pull away a couple of attempts every lap. I'm just trying to keep it tidy going through the last corner. I was actually a little bit stronger than the RCF coming through that last corner, but then he starts pulling away a little bit on the straight slightly. Let's see, yeah, 3.2 seconds, so maintaining a reasonably close gap to Oscar Sky Piltman. I did expect him to pull away, so I make a little mistake on that corner, which is going to lose me a bit of time, but I'm pretty much in the middle of nowhere right now. This is quite a quiet stage of the race. You can see I've got 4 seconds behind me and 3 seconds in front of me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to skip ahead through to towards the end of the race, because the next few laps were just pretty much like that, nothing going on. We're going to jump through to the end of lap 15, the start of lap 16. You can see the laps were kept really consistent all the way through to the end of lap 14, constant like mid to low 18s, driving pretty much perfectly at the stage as we start lap 16 and we're jumping into the end of the race now. You can see I've managed to keep that gap slightly ahead of Org, gaining pretty much a few attempts every lap because I'm not pushing 100%, and I knew that getting through to the last few laps is when I'm going to be able to just start eking that gap out even more. You can see Oscar Sky Piltman has managed to gain about a second over the last few laps, the last 3-4 laps, so he's about 2-3 tenths lap faster than what I am, possibly able to use a bit more fuel than me, but there was no point me really pushing too hard at this stage, because at this stage of the race I've got a solid lead to P6, and P4 is just too far ahead really. Just a few laps to go. There was no point me wasting my tyres and risking an error just to get any closer. I just wanted to keep it consistent, keep the fuel saving going. and try and just get a solid P5 finish. That was the aim, and everything's going reasonably well at this stage as we're coming now to the end of lap 16 and starting 2 laps to go. You can see the lap times have been really consistent. I'm really dry. I drove this race really well, to be fair. I couldn't fault. I made that one mistake earlier on where I gave P3 the chance to get back past me, but it was going to happen anyway. I didn't have the outright pace with this car at this track to really do much about them leaders, so I was just sticking to my plan and driving a really solid race as we go over the line. Let's have a little look as we go over the line. And 1 minute 19 probably now. Yeah, 1 minute 19 is a tyre wear starting to kick in as we come to the last 2 laps. And I'm just trying to keep it calm now. I'm not trying to make any errors because I've got such a comfortable position now. I didn't really feel the need to push too hard as we're going through this right hand corner, and this is pretty much a disaster by the title, not again. A very silly mistake coming up now. To be fair though, there is a reason why I've made this mistake, and it's not really my fault. You're going to see totally missed my braking and went off when not under any pressure. I was really annoyed about that. You can see gave P5 to PO, just about managed to stay ahead of P6 because I'd driven so well. I still came out into P6, and obviously the 4-wheel drive cars were nowhere to be seen. They're struggling at this track, so still managed to come out in P6, which is not a bad position, but was a little bit annoyed at myself. I had to use a bit of fuel up as well now because I didn't want to lose this P6. I wanted to keep at least the P6 in the race, so burn some fuel down the straight now, trying to make sure he doesn't get near me. You see me revving out the car. That's going to use a lot of fuel when you do that in the Mercedes, but making sure that he can't make a move going into this final corner. And I expected to be able to pull away from P7, sorry, because I had pulled away so much during the early stages that I pretty much knew that once I got him out of the slipstream, pretty much there's no way he's going to be able to make a move. But I was really annoyed at that. We're going to show you at the end when the race is finished. I'm going to go through all the highlights and show you why I actually made that mistake. And I didn't realise 100% why I'd made that mistake until I watched it back, and it's so I can't believe I didn't even notice it. But it kind of wasn't my fault. It's to do with the brake markers. There was obviously someone who's had an incident before that, and I'm going to show you when we go through the highlights as we now come through to the final lap. I tried to push a little bit on this lap, but then realised my fuel was going, and then realised the understeer was kicking in. Look at that front left hand tyre. Because I spun, it takes life out of your tyres, and I've got no grip on that front left anymore. Managed to gain about 3-4 tenths on August. He's obviously struggling as well, but I just haven't got the fuel anymore. I didn't even notice right to the end. You're going to see I have to go into a really lean mixture because I obviously used that fuel to get away from P7 so that he couldn't make a move on me in the slipstream. Coming into the last corners, I go into the last corner with 1% fuel and need to go to drastic fuel saving measures as we come into this final corner. You're going to see now, I seen a 1% kick in and went straight to 3% for this final corner, and I think I had to go even higher down the straight because 1% fuel is not a lot of fuel at this track. It's a short lap, so 0.1 laps of fuel left as we go into the final corner, having to short shift in 4 mixture now, and I just pretty much go all the way to 6 mixture just so I don't run out of fuel and lose enough position. As Org, very happy there, obviously picked up a P5, a great result for him in the 4-wheel drive car. I was really annoyed at myself, a stupid mistake, but one that really wasn't my fault. You can see I lost nearly about 12 seconds with that incident because I was only about 3-4 seconds behind Oscar Piltman, so 11-12 seconds lost in one incident. It just shows you how much it lost you making these errors on this track because it's so, there's no runoffs. It's just bare open space. You end up just in the sand. There's no barriers to stop you going off, and it was a massive loss of time. So a bit frustrated with that. Would have finished within about 15 seconds of the leader, which would have been okay, but ended up finishing way down in P6. Still picked up okay points. I think it was just under 2,000 points, but that doesn't cast as a point scoring round for me because I've already done 5 rounds over 2,000 points. So not the worst result, but a little bit disappointed that I lost that one position because a P5 I would have been a bit happier with. But even then, I wouldn't have got enough points to make any sort of gains in the championship. As you can see now, this was a move on P3 on lap 1 as he made a mistake going into this left hand corner. You can see he got too much of that tyre on the gravel, lost the rear end. I then got on the power and went a little bit aggressive with the fuel to try and get past him. I seen an opportunity, had to take it, went on the right hand side, used a bit more of the power the SLS has over the Cayman. The SLS just a bit more powerful down the straights than the Cayman, and managed to make that move fairly easily. To move the camera back just to show you a nice clean move, nothing he could really do. Made sure I covered the inside and got that move done on lap 1. Now this was the overtake that the Porsche made back on myself, as I made a mistake going into the final corner. You can see I took too tight a line, didn't get any exit speed because I had to run wide, ran onto the gravel, lost speed, and he made an easy pass on the outside, so I just slopped back into the slipstream, went back into the fuel saving that I was doing. Was a bit frustrating because it lost me the slipstream of P3 off our Sky Pit. Now this was the incident where I went off the track, and look out for the 50 board. I didn't spot this until I watched it. The 150's there, the 100's there, and the 50 board's been taken off. It's gone. And I didn't spot this when I come around, and this is why I wish they had the Drive Club board system where they bounce back up, they don't just disappear, because that was my braking reference gone. Obviously, I should have been looking out for other braking references, but when you're that much in the zone, just driving to your reference points, it's so easy a mistake to make when someone's gone off the track. Obviously, someone's gone off on the track, either a back marker behind me on the previous lap, or someone just ahead of me on that lap. I don't know who it was who's done it. I'm guessing it would have been a back marker because no one in front of me really made an error, so it must have been someone behind in the race, one of the other cars struggling, gone off, took the 50 board out, and then that's my braking reference gone completely. And I've just basically looked at the 20 board thinking it's a 50 and outbraked myself. So a really frustrating thing to happen, and the only mistake I really made in the race, it would have cost me anything, and it cost me quite badly, about 12-13 seconds, but still came away with P6, so I can't really complain too much. And a fairly quiet race in the last stint because most of the other cars were just too far behind, and the first stint was fairly enjoyable. Enjoyed racing the first stint, but it was a lot of fuel saving. I had to do that to even give myself a chance of getting near them other cars. But let's see what let's see what happens in round 8. Monza's going to be definitely a better chance for myself to pick up some good scores, points compared to the last 24 race. I'm just not too sure about the AMG's power down the straight. It's a few miles per hour down compared to a lot of the other cars, so it'll be interesting to see how that race pans out. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Click the notification button so you don't miss any future videos, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thanks again for watching, everyone.